Hello, Ragil. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you in advance for your presentation that you're going to be giving at Families in Global Transition this year in Bangkok. My name is Ginny Philps. I'm the Communications Co-Director at Families in Global Transition. We're thrilled to have you on board. Would you be able to just start by explaining a little bit about your background, why you're a perfect fit for the conference, and then we'll move on to the actual theme of some of the things that you're going to talk to us about.
Sure. Hi, Ginny. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm really quite honored that I get a chance to speak at the conference, because I get a feeling that there's quite a nice fit. I recognize a lot of the things that the conference focuses on as being part of my own background and experience. In brief, I was born in Sri Lanka, left when I was very young to move to Zambia. Grew up there for about 10 years, had my first international school experience there. And from there moved to what was then a homeland of South Africa. So it was a country within South Africa that was not recognized by any other country except South Africa. So an imaginary country, so to speak. And from there, I spent a significant part of my growing up from there. From about 14 to about till my sort of early 30s, I studied there. I finished school. I trained and qualified as a clinical psychologist, and then moved into the academic world. I worked as a lecturer for about 7 years in psychology, and then moved into the corporate world doing talent management and leadership development, which is the career path I've followed since then. I worked for a financial services company in Cape Town, which transferred me from there after a few years to Boston in the US, where I spent a year, and then I was transferred to the global headquarters in London, where I stayed for about 4 years. After I'd done most of what I wanted to do in the company and in the UK, I wanted to try and get some experience in Asia. And so I left my role there and moved to Thailand, partly because the cost of living was relatively good for someone who wasn't in employment, but also because it was a really great, and still is a really great, transport hub to the rest of Southeast Asia. Since then, I worked for a little while in Singapore for Credit Suisse, and then came back here, set up a company and a practice, and I do leadership development independently and with a range of associates, for example, with Duke Corporate Education and a few other companies who I represent as a facilitator and orchestrator to various clients.
Fantastic. Wow. Okay, so your international upbringing, that's probably had a great part in not only your career path, but also the values that you hold and the what you can bring to the table, regardless of the kind of clients that you're working with. Have you got any examples of any clients that you've worked with where that's really particularly been
sure.
Or anything you can give us in that respect?
I think the international experience, and especially having been brought up in a range of school styles and educational styles, as well as within a range of cultures, has helped me embed myself and work better in Asia, where I'd never worked before, despite having been born here. And I think the two key things, and this is really what I wanted to be able to talk about, is the two key things that really I developed being, I suppose, what one could call an outsider in most of the societies and communities where I've lived. It has given me the ability to develop a really strong sense of empathy in terms of understanding how other people think and how other people behave, and being quite proactive in making that attempt to understand that other people may think differently or see things differently than I do. And this has been a huge help, not just as a psychologist, but even in the work that I do with large corporations. The other skill that I feel has been really important is this idea of, which is something that's becoming quite big in the corporate world at the moment, is this idea of sense making and using ethnographic tools to understand business.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that comes quite naturally to me, because having been on the outside, it's always much easier to have, well, not necessarily an objective view, but a different perspective on various business practices, communities, and businesses. And so these are the two things that I tend to work with when I work with large corporations at the moment. So an example I could give you is I've done a lot of work recently with Unilever, which is a really large global multinational company that has its headquarters in, it's one of the few companies that has dual headquarters, one in London, one in Amsterdam. And I've done workshops for them, helping their leaders understand how to lead through disruptive change and through digital transformation and through the current environment. And I've done work for them in, most recently in Indonesia, but previously in Schaffhausen in Switzerland and in Johannesburg in South Africa. And being able to manage the range of cultures in all of those locations has been very helpful, has been helped by my upbringing and my background.
Fantastic. So you can kind of pivot between communities and certainly mindsets with the work that you're doing. Sounds fantastic. I studied social anthropology, so I can understand a lot of what you're saying with the ethnographic piece. So the conference is focusing on embracing and bridging differences. I've explained a little bit to the viewers that we have a very diverse audience at the conference. We have a very diverse membership base. What do you think will be the focus of your talk in terms of embracing and bridging differences at the conference?
My focus is really about, I think what I've seen as, while I have felt a lot of the things that I've seen in the TCK community that I've been exploring only recently, there's a sense of feeling out of place that I've noticed in a lot of these talks. But this has often been articulated as something negative.
Sure.
As something that is missing in our experiences in our lives. And for me, one of the things that I learned relatively early on in my corporate career was that this feeling of being an outsider is actually not a disadvantage, but a huge advantage, and something that should be embraced, because it allows us to bridge differences between various communities that we don't necessarily feel a part of, and yet have a community of people who are similar to us that can do all of these things as well. I've been thinking of a metaphor, and I have a little thing that I would like to share when I talk at the conference. But it comes from this idea of, as a social anthropologist, you're probably familiar with the idea of Plato's cave, and this idea that most people are chained to a wall in a cave, and they see shadows on the wall that are created by the light coming in, and see this as a true experience. Whereas if you are an outsider that has experienced various caves, you can actually put yourself outside those caves and see reality as it is, and therefore help other people to do that.
Fantastic.
So what I very strongly believe that we should embrace the fact that we are not part of a specific culture or a specific location. I was listening recently to Thai Selassie, who had a lovely talk on TED Talks about being this multicultural person. And she talks about being local rather than being native to a certain country. And for me, I mean, that's nice, but I also am a bit wary of connecting identity to location. And I don't think we should do that. I think our identities are much bigger than that. And we hold a lot more when we don't sit with this thing of, oh, where am I from? And does that, and even if it's from 10 different places, does that define who I am?
Absolutely.
I believe that, this idea of this question of where are you from is a little game that is played by insiders. And it's a trap that outsiders fall into, because it makes us feel like outsiders when in fact, that's okay. We don't have to answer the question in the way that people expect us to, just because that's how they expect us to answer it. So for me, that's some of the stuff I was hoping to talk about a little.
Oh, fantastic. We'll have to have lots of room for debate at the end, because it's the kind of thing that everyone who's there and watching will certainly have experienced at some point or another. Even the types of questions that our children are asked as well, same thing. But really to dig behind that and question some of those assumptions or deconstruct some of those questions is going to be very exciting. Fantastic. Well, we're really looking forward to it. And thank you so much again for stepping up and joining us in the conference. We're also looking forward to coming to Bangkok, seeing your hometown for now. And it's not long now, just a few weeks. So thank you again. And we will be following up with some social media and some further information shortly.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you.